about the algebra tiles to factor trinomials yesterday. So today I'm going to give you a different method. So if you don't have the algebra tiles, it's not the end of the world. So the very first thing when we're going to factor is we need to check for a GCF and factor out all of those GCF factors, right? Factor out all the greatest common factors. Okay, so that's like what we very first started with, where we were looking like we have 9a squared minus 3a, right? We could take out a 3a. Whatever you take out goes outside the parentheses, and then what's left is inside. All right. The second thing that we need to do, and I'm not going to give you any today where you have to do the GCF. We'll get to that probably beginning of next week. The second thing you need to look at is you need to look at the sign of the last term. And when it is a positive, and this kind of goes back to what Chris and I were talking about on that last example. When this is a positive, that means the sign inside the two parentheses is going to be the same, right? The sign of our middle term is going to determine what that same sign will be, okay? So if you look here, I have ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is the coefficient of our leading term, b is the coefficient of just our x term, and then c is our constant. So if you look right here, ax squared plus bx plus c, if this is a positive, this is going to tell me, are they both positive or are they both negative? Okay, so since this is a positive, that tells us that our signs will be the same. Okay, so we're going to have something plus something times something plus something. Okay, if your middle term is a negative, but your last term is a positive, then this is going to be a minus. Okay, so for example, if I gave you x squared plus 3x plus 2, right? My last term is a positive, so whatever this is needs to multiply to be a positive, and we're going to look at this when we do the cross puzzle, needs to equal a positive here. But if I gave you x squared minus 2x plus 1, okay, this tells you, remember, because when we multiply our last terms, that gives us this. These have to be the same sign, but this is going to make them be negative. And we're going to do some actual examples, so don't stress if that doesn't make too much sense just yet. The question you need to ask yourself is kind of like a big puzzle. What multiplies to give the last term? So when we were building with the algebra tiles yesterday, we looked at that last term. And so, for example, if it was 3, we know the only numbers that multiply to make 3 are 3 and 1. Okay, so we have to think about that. But then we're going to add a step today, and we're going to talk about what combines to give the middle term. Okay, where the last term we call this C, the middle term we call this B. And I'm going to show you in the box method, and then I'm going to show you a second method called a cross puzzle that I think you're probably going to like a little bit better. Okay. Yesterday when we did the algebra tiles, we talked about, right, our x squared goes here, right? Our a is always in the top left, and our c is in the bottom right. Yes? So when we look at this, and we talked about also, what is going to be out here to give us this inside piece? So what times what is x squared? Well, it can only be what? X times x. Now, we also learned when we were doing FOIL and box that these middle terms are usually like terms, and they need to combine to equal that middle piece, right? So this is where our B term comes from. So we need to think about these two questions. What multiplies to give me C, which in this case is 6? What multiplies to give me 6? We have two possible sets of factors. We can have 3 and 2 and 1 and 6. Okay, so we have two options here. Well, how do we pick which one we want? Well, which of these sets will combine to give me B, which happens to be 5? Nate, the 3 and the 2. So I know this is going to be x plus 3 and x plus 2, because when I put these together, I get 2x, I get 3x, which gives me my 5x. Okay, so my factors are x plus 3 times x plus 2. If I FOIL or I box this, I'm going to end up with x squared plus 5x plus 6. Do you see how that works out? Okay. Now, going back to the rule at the top, this was a positive C, so my signs were the same, and it went with the sign of B. Okay? So I'm going to show you this next one, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about the cross puzzle. So again, here, A goes in upper left, C goes in the bottom right, and I know that this together is going to equal my B. All right, so think about what times what is x squared. Can only be x times x. And now, same questions. What multiplies to give us 6? Well, it's the same as what it was before. It was 3 and 2 and 1 and 6. But now, because this is a negative middle term, our signs, we know they have to be the same because it's a positive times a positive is a positive, or a negative times a negative is a positive. So we know these have to be negative. It's still 3 and 2, but now they are negative 3 and negative 2. Do you see that? So now we have x minus 2, x minus 3. You can write it in any order. Now, if you're like, Mrs. Ray, I don't want to draw a box every single time. Anyone feel like that? All right, I don't blame you. I'm in that boat with you. We can do something called a cross puzzle. Okay? I'm going to stick with these same examples so you can see that we are, in fact, going to get the same answer. So a cross puzzle is a big, giant X. Okay? And in this top part of the X, we write A times C. And in this bottom part of the X, we write B. And we're still asking ourselves those same two questions, okay? So A here, A is 1. Does everyone understand when I say A what I'm talking about? And C is 6. So 1 times 6 is 6. Yes? My B is a positive 5. So it's the same process that we did here for this next piece. I just want to go ahead and show you this is a different way so you don't have to draw the box. We're still going to ask ourselves this question we had up here, what multiplies to give C? Well, we already know 2 and 3, right? And 1 and 6. But then what combines to give you 5? Well, it's still 3 and 2. These become our factors. Okay, so once I get this, then I can write x plus 3, x plus 2. You're finished. Do you see that? Because these two multiply to give you this, and these two add to give you this. You see how the cross puzzle works? You're just not having to draw the big giant box. Okay? You want to see it on the next one? So same concept, right? We always write A and C and B. So again, A is 1. Later on this week, we're going to look at what happens when A is not 1. It adds one little step. okay? All right, so A times C was 6, B was -5. Again, since this is a negative, these are both negative. 2 times 3, -2 times -3, +6. -2 plus a -3 is a -5. Okay? How do you feel about, do you like that better than drawing the box? Same process. All right, let's look at the back. What? Yes, but when I add the piece at the end of the week, when A is not 1, it gets a little bit harder. All right, so let's look here. What happens, though, if C is a negative? All right, that means the sign inside of the parentheses will always be different, right? Because the only way to get a negative when you're multiplying is 1 is a negative and 1 is a positive. Okay, the sign of the middle term always goes with the larger value. So think way back to 6th grade when we talked about adding and subtracting integers, right? If I have a -6 and a +10, I'm going to subtract those. 10 minus 6, I have more positives. So if I have +6 and -10, it's still going to be, I have more negatives now. So we want to make sure you get that same value. You're still going to ask yourself, same 2 questions. What multiplies to give you C, also known as the last term? And what combines? And in this case, when we're combining, we're actually subtracting because they're different. Subtracts to get B, that middle term. Okay? So if you look down here, ax squared plus bx minus c, this means the signs are going to be different, right? And this b term tells you what sign goes with our larger factor, okay? So it just depends. So here are some values here. We look at, right, here's a, here's c. It's kind of like the box method is just kind of turned this way, right? Here's your x squared, here's your -6. We know this is x and this is x, but to get a -6, you have to have a negative times a positive. So you still, this is going to be, is a positive 5x. So what are my factors that make 6? What did we say a minute ago? 2 and 3 and 1 and 6. But it's not 2 and 3 this time, because if I have a negative and a positive, I'm subtracting these. If I subtract these, I get 1. If I subtract these, I get 5. So now it's 1 and 6. But the question becomes, which one is positive and which one is negative? If I want a positive 5, it's going to, right? The 6 is going to be a positive and the 1 is going to be a negative, because I get -1x plus 6x. So my factors are x minus 1 and x plus 6. Do you see how that is different than when C is a positive? All right, same thing here. A and C, we've got x squared. We have -6, x times x. But now this is -5x. Well, it's still 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. But again, we're subtracting. I know they're going to be different. But if I want a -5, now my 6 is negative and my 1 is positive. So I have x minus 6 and x plus 1. Okay, do you see that relationship there?
Yeah.
So again, you can do the cross puzzle. Same concept, you just don't have to draw the big old box, right? A, C, and B, 1 times a -6 is a -6. That right there should tell you I have a positive and a negative. My B is a positive 5. So I know I'm subtracting. Well, again, -1, positive 6, and we can jump straight to here. Same thing here on the cross puzzle, A and C and B. 1 times a negative 6 is a negative 6. So again, you know they're different. B is a negative 5 this time, so I need to have more negatives. So negative 6, positive 1. All right? I'm going to do one on your homework with you. All right, I am going to do this first one with you. Not tomorrow, but Thursday, we're going to look at what happens. There's a little extra step when A is not 1. So here's my cross puzzle, right? A times C and B. My A is 1. 1 times 7 is 7. My B is 8. Well, the only thing that multiplies to give me 7 is 1 and 7. Now, B is a positive, so those have to be positive values. So I am going to write x plus 1 times x plus 7, and I'm finished. You know, because we are factoring. We are done at that point. Those are my two binomials that if I did my FOIL, and you can always go back and do that to check, I will end up here. Okay? See what you can get done.